Welcome to the Up in Your Family Business podcast, where we dive into the heart of family business with intimate interviews, expert insights, inspirational stories, valuable resources, and practical tips to help grow your family business. I am Todd Reimer, co-owner of Element 212 and the host of this podcast. Thank you for listening to and or watching this episode. The purpose and goal of this podcast, with the help of our guests, are to help family business leaders gain insights, solve problems, be inspired, seize opportunities, stay competitive, and achieve multi-generational prosperity. Okay. So today is going to be an interesting one because we talk a lot about business topics or topics related to business. Today's real excited about today. Today is going to be just a little bit different in the sense of it's my guest, Eric Johnson, by the way. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. This is going to be a real personal conversation today with Eric. Eric's going to share some aspects of his life that are going to put him in a vulnerable position. But he's hoping by sharing his personal stories, his personal journey, what he's learned in life, it'll actually maybe inspire you and maybe be relatable and maybe provide some insights that you can apply to your own life. So let me give you a little background into what we're talking about today specifically. So Eric is a father, business owner, and survivor of life's trials. Over the years, Eric has faced life-changing challenges that tested his strength, his faith, and his determination, from personal hardships to high-stakes professional experiences. Through grit and reflection, Eric has learned how to transform struggle into resilience, and this is my favorite part, pain into purpose. I like pain into purpose. I almost had the title of this thing be something with pain into purpose, but I couldn't pull it off. As the owner of Capital Tree Service, located in Mooresville, Indiana, Eric's hands-on approach mirrors his personal philosophy, which is stay grounded, work hard, and grow stronger through life's lessons and seasons. Whether it's running his business, supporting his family, or navigating tough transitions, Eric is passionate about living intentionally and inspiring others to do the same. Again, brings us to where we are today. Eric's story is a journey of perseverance, redemption, and self-discovery. From overcoming adversity to balancing the responsibilities of parenting and business ownership, Eric offers perspectives on how to carry on and thrive, no matter what life throws his way or your way. Lastly, his story serves as a reminder that even the hardest moments, there is strength to be found and that tomorrow is always worth showing up for. And he is passionate about using his story to help others see their struggles in a new light. So when I heard this story, I thought, well, if your passion is to share your story, why don't we have you as a guest on the podcast and you can do just that, share your story. And hopefully, again, like I shared in the beginning, maybe there's some aspect of your story that's relatable. Maybe someone else is struggling with, again, before we started, we talked about the way the world sees anxiety and stress. Is there anxiety? Is there stress? Yes. But the problem is, how are you dealing with it? Mm-hmm. How are you responding to it? How do you use stress and failures and losses and challenges and struggles and all these things that kind of oftentimes bring us down mentally, psychologically, right? Yeah. Kind of stifle our life. How do we look at those and how do we propel ourselves forward in a better way? So I know that's what you want to talk about today, and I'm as the host, I hope I do you justice. I hope that you're able to share your story and that I am able to honor you by having a conversation with you today.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it's going to be great.
Okay, so let's do this. Just to get you off and running, I'll ask you one question, and then from there we'll see where we go.
Yeah,
all right. So we talked about life challenges. So this is a big question. You have faced some life-changing challenges. Can you start by sharing a few of those key moments that shaped your journey?
Oh man.
Pow.
You're right. We're jumping right in. So my life started off as a struggle. Like my parents were divorced before I was even born.
Wow.
I have no recollection of my parents ever living in the same home. And so for the first 7 years of my life, my whole goal in life as a small child was to get my parents back together.
Really? As a child, you thought that was your responsibility?
I felt that was...
Wow.
It was almost like... it's what I needed to be whole. And as a child, I remember begging my parents, and it was constant. It's a huge thing in my life. And my mom remarried my stepfather when I was 7, and so I was kind of set off into struggle from the very beginning. And then you jump into, like I on my mom's side, I was the only one that had my last name. Okay. Everybody, all my siblings, my mom, my stepdad, they all had shared a different last name. And I lived, 2 or 3 days at my dad's house, 2 or 3 days at my mom's house. So it's really hard to make that connection. And so I spent a lot of time alone. But then, later in life, we all have struggles. But I think one of the biggest struggles I've probably ever been through was my motor vehicle accident, being hit head on by a dump truck.
Literally,
yeah. 2-lane road. He swerved left and collected my truck. We were both doing about 60 miles an hour. I've recently had AI help me do the calculations, and it comes out to 21,600 newtons, which is like standing about 3 feet from a hand grenade. Yeah.
Were you wearing a seatbelt?
No, not at all.
Oh boy.
No. I was actually, I was leaning, it was a nice day, and I was actually leaning out my driver window, and that's honestly probably what saved me. Had I been leaning on the console, my head would have been right in line with the dump truck.
Really?
Yeah. So, but that struggle was, it was intense.
When did that happen? How many years ago are we talking?
That was August 26th, 2017.
Okay.
And my daughter had been born, my oldest daughter had been born 3 days before that.
Okay.
And she was in the NICU at Riley.
My goodness.
It was a mess. It was an absolute mess. I walked away. Well, I didn't walk away from that accident. When they hit me with the when the EMTs came up to the accident, I was actually conscious. And they asked me if I was allergic to fentanyl.
Oh gosh.
I said, well, I don't think so. And so they shot me up with fentanyl.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I looked at him. I was like, 10 seconds later, I looked at him. I was like, get out of the way. I'll walk out.
Wow.
Which obviously I wasn't able to do. Yeah,
of course.
But yeah, I walked away from that with traumatic brain injury, with 13 rib fractures, all of which were on my right side.
Okay.
And then 3 of my ribs, my 7, 8, and 9, were actually exploded out of my back. They were just fragmented.
Whoa.
And so now I have 3 plates that actually bridge my ribs back together. My 7 and 8 and 9 rib on my right side. And so I've got 3 plates and 24 screws, and I wake up with back pain every morning.
Do you?
Every morning.
Does it get better as the day goes on, or not nearly?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I feel great right now.
Okay.
Usually, so I heat my home with a wood boiler. So it requires me every morning. I have to go out and fill the stove, and it's a big unit. So I get a good workout and good stretch in every morning whenever I'm out there chucking firewood in for the day.
Funny.
But usually between that and a nice hot shower first thing in the morning, good to go. But I spent quite a bit of time in Methodist when my daughter was right next door at Riley, and my wife was going back and forth. My 2-year-old, my oldest, he was 2 at the time. And he was bouncing around from my dad to my sister to my mom.
Right.
It was a nightmare.
Logistical nightmare. Not to mention all the stress and
yeah, absolutely.
And all just dealing with all that, just bouncing all that.
Yeah. The real strength that I saw in all of that was my wife, and her ability to keep all of us together throughout all that was. It was all inspiring, really.
How long were you in the hospital?
So I was actually only in the hospital for about 2 days.
That's it?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. But then I had to come back.
Even with the injury into your head, they
yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I was ready to leave the next day.
Wow.
Because it was like a Sunday, and there's not a lot of doctors there on Sundays, and they're just more or less just seems like they're trying to keep you alive until the doctors get back Monday.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, if I'm just going to be sitting here, if we're not going to be doing anything, can I go home? Really? I can sit and do nothing on the couch at home. I'm good at that. You know? But then about 2 weeks later, I had to go back, and I actually lived in Methodist for about 5 days.
Okay.
Because my back surgery was so intense.
Oh, you had to go back in. Did you have surgery?
I didn't have a surgery initially.
Okay.
No, they actually let me go. And
wow.
Yeah.
This is really interesting.
Yeah, it was
It seems
pretty crazy.
A little backwards.
It was very backwards. But I think a lot of it they were trying to let me make decisions with my fresh traumatic brain injury. Huh. And it's like, we probably shouldn't let this guy make decisions.
Did you suffer any short-term or long-term consequences from the accident? I mean, other than your ribs and your back? I mean, anything else?
So I've got a traumatic brain injury from that, and it makes it very hard to remember things. I have zero sense of smell.
Really?
Yeah, which is
that could be good sometimes.
It's a blessing and a curse. We've spent 10 years now in diapers. My wife and I have.
Yeah, I was gonna say changing diapers. That's a blessing.
It's great. It's great. I was actually changing one this weekend for the baby, and my oldest son, who he's 10 now. He got up and walked out of the room.
And you're like,
that is gross.
It's nothing. I can handle this. No problem.
Like, does it really smell that bad? He's like, oh yeah, that's awful.
So how do you, just on a side note, you probably can't enjoy certain foods anymore, right? That affects your taste.
Well, I like to say that.
You like spicy stuff now?
No, so I've always eaten about like a 40-year-old.
Oh.
So
just don't behave like a 4-year-old.
Right. I try to keep that to a minimum.
Your wife would appreciate that.
My 4-year-old does appreciate it though. But no, I make the joke that me and my 4-year-old tend to eat about the same foods.
Really?
Yeah. I've never been a vegetable eater. I just can't make it.
I love fruits and vegetables.
I love fruit. Just can't touch. I can't do vegetables.
I wouldn't say I'm a health freak because I definitely still enjoy, but I just keep it to a minimum. But I know there are people that are way more serious than I am, but I think I do pretty well. So we'll have a talk afterwards.
Absolutely.
I'll give you a little. I'm sure you'd love to hear a lecture from me on how to eat. So we'll do that.
Absolutely. Like my last lecture I got from you about smoking.
That's right.
Hey man, I'm down to. I started putting a patch on, and I'm down to about 6 to 10 a day.
Dang.
Which is half.
That's really good.
Yeah. Yeah,
that's really good.
So it's going.
Yeah, for you listeners, when I first met Eric, the second time we talked, I just couldn't help it. I'm just like, he was telling me his story, and I'm just like, man, you could really help yourself if you just, stop smoking.
Yeah, it's a rough one.
Luckily, you didn't tell me to go to hell. You actually seem to appreciate my genuine concern.
I always appreciate genuine concern for sure.
Now that doesn't mean you weren't thinking it. You just didn't say it.
Right.
So okay, so you talked about your childhood, and of course, unfortunately, lots of people will go through divorce.
Absolutely.
It was interesting that you said that you felt it was your responsibility. However you said it, I'm sorry, but like you felt it was your job or your responsibility to get your parents back together, that's an enormous weight to put on your own shoulders. And it's really interesting that you felt that.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a natural thing that children have. It could be.
It very well could be. I don't have the statistics on that.
And I'm based on what you told me, they never did get back together again.
Never.
Okay, because you said
they hate each other's guts.
Okay, well then that probably is not going to work out. Then still no chance, right?
No,
okay.
Definitely not.
Okay. So that was when you were younger. Walk us through. So when you're younger, you have this, and then you have the accident. Were there any big moments in your life in between that may have set the stage for your future, big impact, maybe started having you question things and start really rethinking life and how you approach life, anything in between, before the accident?
Man, before the accident, I bounced around a lot between jobs,
okay.
Trying different things, My father owned a residential painting business.
Okay.
And so I grew up in that.
Okay.
didn't go to daycare a lot. My dad actually just took me to work.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah.
Wow.
So like any brand new home that was being built, like
That's
custom
wild.
home that my dad was painting, I would actually in the 80s take naps in the bathtubs of these new custom homes that my dad was building.
That's wild. You talking like when you were like 2, 3 years old?
3, 4. Oh yeah.
That's
absolutely.
wild.
Yeah, I have very few memories of actually going to daycare, and I have a lot more memories going to work.
That's funny. So your exposure to paint at an early age could explain a lot of things, right?
It could definitely. Yeah, those paint chips. We never really had lays. We always just had paint chips.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like the accident was a big moment in your life.
It was.
Okay. What's happened in your life? What's happened in your life since the accident? Tell. So maybe what we'll do is, rather than going through your whole life,
sure,
let's just start from the accident on.
Okay.
So what were other results from that? What happened what happened professionally and personally?
Sure.
Walk us through what happened after that.
Yeah. So before the accident, I was building cell towers.
Okay.
And I did that for about 10 years.
Okay.
After the accident, my surgeon was like, you can't ever do that again. Your back's just never going to handle it, which honestly, between you and me, I think I can do it just fine now.
Okay.
But knowing that, I couldn't go back to that industry that I had spent a solid 10 years in. I'd built over 400 towers.
Wow.
Actually, there's a guide tower just right out there that I've been on several times.
Really?
Yeah, and on the way here, I got to pass a lot of towers that I used to climb. So that's fun. But
yeah, I couldn't handle. I'm afraid of heights. Seriously, I don't do well.
I tell people I'm afraid of heights too. Nobody believes me.
Wow.
It's more of a respect thing than like a lockup fear, anxiety type thing.
I'm really happy. I'm getting on a plane tomorrow for the first time in 17 years. So we'll see how that goes.
You'll be all right.
We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, especially with all the recent.
Oh yeah, it'd be great.
Recent.
There've been no incidents. No, I'll be fine.
You'll be just fine.
I'll be fine.
So after the accident, we had to go through this. My wife and I, we had to go through this whole thing of, our whole life is going to have to change. Because I was building cell towers. I was living on the road. You're gone 48 weeks out of the year.
Oh, wow.
You might get home every weekend. You might get home every other weekend. But like our whole life had to change.
Okay.
And so we went into, what are we going to do now? And so with that, we decided that real estate. We'd flipped a couple of houses before. The house that we lived in at the time, we actually flipped it and bought. Whenever we bought it, we got a really good deal.
That's great.
We made a lot of equity on it.
That's great.
And did really well. And with that experience, it was kind of like, well, we have this experience, maybe we should kind of track this way. And so we did that, and I've always wanted to have a tree business. And so it was there was a lot of moving parts. There were so many options as to, which way you could go with whatever. And then on top of that, we still had to get my recovery fully done to where I could actually do things again, which was, that was a solid 1.5 to 2 years of, working out 3-4 times a week.
Really?
Yeah. My back was in bad shape.
Okay.
I've got a 12-inch scar that goes all the way across my back from where they had to cut my back open, spread the muscles apart to actually get to the ribs.
Whoa.
It was intense.
Wow. Please tell me that wasn't outpatient.
No. I got to stay in Methodist for 5 days after that one, which was awful. It was that I would never wish that on anybody. It was so rough just to sit there. You can't do anything for 5 days. They had me on an epidural for 4 of those.
How did you feel about? Because you told me about how the accident happened, and it obviously wasn't your fault. But that was, I always tell people close to me, one of the biggest struggles for me personally is I'm all about responsibility and accountability. So if I do something indirectly, directly, I'll own it. I'll claim it.
Yep.
I'll apologize for it. I'll learn from it, and I'll move on. To be honest with you, where I really struggle is I know life happens, I know life can be difficult. One of the, but it's hard for me not to get frustrated, if we'll use that word. It's hard for me not to get frustrated when I suffer, and I know this happens, but like when someone else is responsible for something I'm going through. So, and it's like, I didn't ask for it. I wasn't looking for it. I don't deserve this. And I know again, part of my brain is like, these things are going to happen, but when they do happen, they're sometimes hard for me to process. So that's just full transparency. That's probably my biggest personal struggle. It's not necessarily, I don't get paralyzed by it. I move on from it, regardless of what it is. I just get more frustrated. Like, I'm the person where if I do something myself, I go, well, that was really stupid. But if someone does something to me and it has a big impact on my life, I get really frustrated with it because I'm like, I wasn't looking for it. I didn't ask for it. I don't deserve it. I don't want it. This is not fair. It's like a weird thing. So you get in this accident. I'm sure that there were financial challenges from it. Medical bills, right? A loss of a truck. We talked about your wife having to kind of rise up and kind of manage everything for a little while. So you get in this accident, which it sounds like from the pictures you showed me and from what you've told me, it's a wonder you're even here.
It is.
It's actually a wonder
miracle
that you're here.
Yeah.
So in the days and weeks and months after, did you have any anger towards how it happened, or who did it and all this kind of stuff?
Oh yeah. No, I was very upset. I was very mad at the company that was involved. And you hear things and you don't know whether they're fact or not because you weren't there.
Yeah.
We had heard that
because it happened so fast, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But one thing we had heard so we know that the dump truck had some DOT problems.
Oh.
Even being out on the road, we had heard that they knew that there was a braking problem on this truck, and they sent it out anyway. Well, I wasn't there. I don't know that.
Yeah.
And you go through a lot of that, and anger is a big part of that. But you have to realize that, like, the guy who was driving the truck, he wasn't trying to hurt anybody.
Right.
And once you realize that, and once you realize that, like, there was nothing malicious about it. They weren't trying to kill me. If they were, they failed. But like, I'm nobody, so it's not like I need to be offed. But there's a lot of anger that comes with it. And really, that just took a lot of time and realizing that it wasn't malicious and that it wasn't like personal, because we tend to be more angry about something if it's personal. Did
you have conversations with God about it? We tend to talk to God like, why did this happen to me? And
right. No, I definitely had those conversations. I definitely had some really rough nights, especially. Man, they had me loaded up on medication, and that medication does weird things to you. One side effect of a lot of the medications is like suicidal tendencies.
Jeez.
And
wow.
Yeah. I remember one night I didn't think I was gonna ever get any better. I was sleeping on the couch. I couldn't get off the couch. I mean, I lived on the couch for 6 months.
For 6 months?
Yeah. And then even after that, like, just trying to get into bed was a struggle.
The 6 months following the accident?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Okay. Tell me if I'm getting too personal, but what did that, given the topic we're covering today, what were some hardships and challenges? What did that look like? Obviously, you have kids. You had 2, right?
At the time, yeah.
And a newborn.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to. You have bills to pay. You have a house to maintain, and how. So you're on the couch a lot. I don't know if you're feeling sorry for yourself. That's up to you whether you share that or not. But obviously, you're being on the couch for 6 months. That's not good, right?
No.
So you're not moving on. You're not bringing in an income.
Right.
So what were some of the internal struggles? What were some of the and again, you share whatever you want to share, but what were some of the marital struggles, just life struggles? Like, what was going on at that time that you were dealing with?
Sure. So we were dealing with one of the biggest things that we had to deal with was a fresh traumatic brain injury that
Just dealing with that alone,
that
right?
we didn't know anything about.
Right.
I mean, I would just lose it.
Did it affect your personality?
It did. And I've had to learn to control that a lot.
So you still suffer a little bit from it?
Yeah, I do. So like I told you, I don't have a sense of smell.
Right.
So that was one that was really weird that we had to figure out, which we actually found that out because my daughter would have a dirty diaper, and to me, it would smell like buttered popcorn.
Oh, that's wild.
It was really strange because I'd be asking my wife, like,
That's a good thing.
"Are you making popcorn?" She goes, "No, we don't even have popcorn."
Man, buttered popcorn, that's a good smell to have.
Right? It's not a bad one. But you know, I would get so mad, and I've always, I think a lot of us have a temper to an extent, but like it was beyond the pale.
Ooh.
That was a big struggle. The fact that I couldn't do anything for myself. You know, I think a lot of us have that where, you know, we want to be self-sufficient, and when you can't, it'll make you lose your mind.
Yeah.
Having to ask for every little
men
thing.
Men especially struggle with that stuff.
Yeah.
We just do. We don't like asking for help. We don't like admitting our failures. We don't sure as heck don't want to expose our weaknesses.
Right.
And we don't want to feel, and most importantly, we don't want to feel like we're worthless or incompetent or inadequate or incapable.
Right.
Men, I mean, we have to have purpose. We have to have a drive. We have to have meaning. We have to have all that stuff. So if you're in a situation that lingers on, it's not just the brain injury. It's just hard. It's hard for people, but speaking as a man, I think it's hard for men, especially, to just be sitting around doing nothing like that. Yeah.
It was really rough, and trying to figure out what we were gonna do next, you know. And on top of that, I wasn't working, and
I'm assuming your wife wasn't working either, was she?
No, she was a stay-at-home mom at the time, and it was really crazy how it worked out though. Because I had broken my left foot.
In the accident?
No.
Oh, okay.
Actually, months before the accident.
Oh, my gosh.
At work.
Wow.
And so I was actually on work comp. And then after the accident, I went to one of my work comp doctor's appointment. And I was like all broken, and like my whole right side was broken.
So you got workers' comp? Helped a little bit?
It helped until it didn't. So I went to like one of my next work comp doctor's appointments, and the doctor was like, "Well, you can't do physical therapy like this." It's like, yeah, I guess. And he goes, "Well, then you can't be in the work comp program." So the only income I had just got taken away.
How far into the 6 months did that happen?
So that was actually that was right after the accident. So I broke my foot at work it was probably March, February, around this time of year, because it was still cold. And then I was on work comp through most of the summer.
Yeah.
And then the accident happened, and then I was removed from work
That's right.
comp.
Okay, so pretty quickly.
Yeah. It was right after the accident I was removed from work comp.
Okay.
And so the financial struggles were incredible.
How did that again, you're here today, so I'm gonna ask a question.
Yeah.
Again, you can answer however you want, but like, how did that what kind of, I mean, I can only imagine it, but what kind of pressure and what kind of situation did that create for your marriage?
You know, I think it really gave us better faith in God.
Really?
Yeah, because there wasn't a lot that we could do. My wife tried getting a job.
Okay.
And I tried staying home with a brand new baby and a 2-year-old with 13 rib fractures and staples in my head and everything.
Yeah, you're home, but
you're not really home.
Yeah,
Like,
you're
there,
you're
but
there.
You're not there.
Yeah.
And it lasted, I think she lasted at that job for about 3 days. And
It's just too much.
it was just, we hadn't.
You're probably calling each other constantly.
I was calling her constantly because I was losing my mind. Every little thing that happened was, in my traumatic brain injury, broken mind, it was like, it felt like the end of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm calling her constantly, and her boss is like, we can't do this.
Oh boy.
Crap. So when it came to finances, it was really just a lot of faith. So one thing that really helped carry us, until I could get back to working, work comp cut me a settlement check. Oh. And so that helped carry us quite a ways. But we tried to do it without that. But once we got through all that, we started flipping houses, and that became that became its own struggle.
It's an ambitious thing to do, but it's not easy. I heard it's a lot of tough work. It's always harder than you think it's going to be.
It is.
A lot more work.
It is. And then, like me, I grew up painting custom homes.
And you have to learn a lot too.
You do. And I had a lot of that knowledge from working with my dad growing up. And my dad renovated his whole house. Like at one point, we could roller skate through the entire house.
Oh, that's cool.
Whenever I was a kid, it was great.
Wow.
We had like roller hockey and stuff set up.
So you guys had the open concept a long time ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Way before it was cool. In like a 1920s like row house.
That's wild.
It was fun. But I had a lot of that knowledge going into it. My biggest problem with flipping houses is I try to make them too nice.
Well, plus you had all your physical limitations. I mean, like how did you keep taking all these physical jobs?
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm just
a tree company. I mean, that's a pretty laborious
it is.
job as well.
It is. I always tell people I'm a glutton for punishment.
Okay.
I'm good at physical labor.
Okay.
I'm good at getting things done.
Wow, what was that?
Do you have a train running through the building?
It sounds like a train or. That is really weird. What is correct? Sorry, I don't know if the listeners can hear that, but there's some weird sound going on right near us. Okay.
Do you even see where it's coming from?
I do not.
It's
Okay.
even weirder.
What's even weirder is if we're the only ones that hear it, and our listeners are like, "What are they talking about?" There was just a really strange noise. It just went. It almost felt like it went right through us.
Yeah,
that
like
was
right
wild.
through the table here.
Okay. Anyway, where were we? Okay. So you have these. So you're bedridden for 6 months. You guys are trying to make that work. I was surprised. I mean, I'm really glad to hear that. That's really neat. That I wasn't sure if that experience brought you and your wife closer together, or whether it created a divide. And it can go either way, right?
Of course.
I mean, obviously you're still married today, so obviously you've overcome it. But I was curious to know what that was like. Maybe I've seen too many movies and TV shows, but I was curious as to. I'm a Christian, so I'd like to say, it could bring you closer together, and your faith could get you through it. But at the same time, it isn't always the case. Sometimes when life gets hard, we quit.
Yeah.
When life gets hard, it gets the better of us. It's easy to be a good person. It's easy to be loving when things are good.
Absolutely.
Right? We're all good to go when things are good to go.
Mm-hmm.
But we all know that when life gets hard, when push comes to shove, when that's what we're really made of, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
And there are times in my life where I feel like I rose to the challenge and I did a really great job in spite of the circumstances. But I'm 50, I'm 50 plus years old, and I have some moments in my life where I fell short, and they still plague me today. I still have regrets, if you will, about dumb decisions I made where I should have been stronger. I was weak.
Sure.
Where I should have, what I mean? Like, so life is full of those things. So I'm really glad to hear that you guys got through that. But was that something that the two of you got down and said, this is how we're going to approach this? Or did both of you just naturally just happened that way?
So a lot of it clicked really well for us. But a lot of it was planning and having to come together and like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do now?
Yeah.
Because we had this life that we had built, and we had to figure out how to completely replace an income in a whole new way.
What made you decide that? What made you decide to become an entrepreneur and start a business as opposed to maybe going back and working for? Because obviously that was the switch you made, right?
Yeah.
What made you decide to take that route?
There's a long line of entrepreneurship in my family.
Okay.
My father owned a residential painting business.
Right.
My uncle owns a residential painting business. One of my aunts paints.
Okay.
One of my uncles paints for a guy that used to paint for my dad. One of my aunts and uncles they used to own Napa stores. My grandfather owned a painting company.
This is crazy.
All of his brothers owned painting companies.
Okay.
They actually did work for Disneyland out in California whenever it first opened, like back in the 50s or 60s or whatever, before they all moved back. Painting in my family goes all the way back to like the early 1900s.
That's crazy.
My great grandfather.
I had one of my guests I had on recently is I had Brian and Janine Gillum. They're owners of the Coffee at the Crossing down in McCordsville. Her dad, it was funny. I don't remember the details, but her dad was a barber. Her brother was a barber, and then she started telling me all these other people in the family that were barbers. So it just made me think of that. So as I'm hearing this, I'm like, your whole entire family was in painting.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I remember my grandfather actually owned the paint store that was in my hometown of Mooresville. So as a small child, instead of going to daycare, I would actually go to the paint store with my dad to pick up the paint.
That's
for
what
the
you
day.
said, yeah.
And
that's really neat.
I'd get to see my grandpa and half my aunts and everything while I was there.
Well, that's really cool because I don't know if it was a challenge back then or not, but one of the things that's really going on in the family business space right now is it's getting harder and harder for the newer generations coming around. I mean, one of the things, what I like to do is I want to see as many family businesses thrive.
Sure.
I want to see as many family businesses stay open, be competitive, not just survive but thrive. I mean, that's something that I feel very passionate about, and it's really sad because passing the torch from one generation to another, it seems like it's getting harder and harder. And it's not like it's not like that wasn't a challenge in the past, but the number of people that you're talking about is just, how did so many people love painting? How did so many people in the family choose to pursue that? That's a highly unusual.
I think it all comes back to, I remember my grandpa telling me that, he's like, listen to your dad. Your dad will teach you something that will always put food on your plate. And growing up seeing the lifestyle that you live and seeing what your dad does, it's like, well, clearly this works. And my family just has a name for painting.
Okay.
Okay. I remember being 19 and I had a guy from Florida. It was a builder that we worked for here, and he bought an entire addition down in Florida that hadn't been, it had been developed. The streets were in, but they hadn't put any houses in yet.
Yeah.
And he bought that whole addition, and he went down there to build houses. And he called me up at like 19, goes, hey, you want to come down and paint my houses? As a 19-year-old, you're like, well, I guess I'm going to be a painter.
That's funny.
I think that's a lot of how it works too,
Did you do, so I know you have Capital Tree Service. Have you abandoned the painting? Did you do?
I have.
Okay, so you don't
completely.
Do that at all.
I only own Capital Painting Service for my wife.
Okay. Okay.
Or at least she thinks I own Capital Painting Service.
Okay.
But she also thinks I own Capital Lawn Mowing, Capital Trim Work, Capital Tile, whatever the case may be.
Okay. What made you decide not to go into the painting again?
I've always liked hard labor.
Because you're just breaking tradition. You're just ruining it all.
I am. I've always liked working really hard. Just physical labor has just always made me happy.
So that break, that was just that was really unfortunate for you.
It was. And I had to figure out how to get back to it. Painting's fun, but it's not hard labor. Right.
Okay.
You're just rolling walls.
It's labor,
you're just cutting in.
okay.
Yeah.
So you like to sweat.
I like the physical.
You like the actual build muscle and
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't
use your hands more like in the traditional sense. I see. Okay.
Yeah. Now the point I'm at now, I don't sweat so much whenever I'm taking down trees because I've got enough equipment now that it's starting to make life a little easier.
Okay. So 2017 was your accident. We're in 2025. What other challenges and obstacles did you have to overcome in the meantime?
So we went through and we flipped some houses. One struggle we had to deal with was realtors. Mm-hmm. We didn't have like an inside track on a realtor that was gonna, help us find the better deals or like, we didn't know about off-market deals.
That's what I'm saying. There's so much to learn. There's just so much.
Is. And, the realtor that we had, love her to death. She wasn't a good realtor for what we were trying to do.
Right.
A couple houses got miscomped. And we went in flipping them, thinking we were going to get X, and then they didn't sell for So we actually, because of that, found our way into being landlords.
Really?
Yeah, because we purchased a home in it would have been 2018 or 2019. Got a heck of a deal on it. She comped it, I think like 190, 195. And it sat there in 2018, and the market was hot. And it wouldn't sell. Nobody'd even look at it, and we couldn't figure out why. And finally, we got somebody to look at it, and they were like, "Yeah, you're never going to get that price." And I was like, "All right, well, we can't lose money on it." So, so we turned it into a rental, and we recouped everything that we were going to lose, and then. We ended up, and then we held it until the market went up. I think we sold it in 22, and just made a killing on it.
So it was just delayed.
Yeah, that's all it was.
Smart move. Yeah,
but we didn't have any. We had no background into being landlords, and learning to.
Some people do really well with it, and some people do really well with it, but it looks. It's hard for me, as an outsider, not knowing the business. It seems like it would be hard to be profitable. So obviously, I don't know much about it, but dealing with the people, and having to collect rent and making sure that the renters don't damage the home, and if they do, dealing with it from a legal perspective, it's just like, oh yeah, it seems like a lot.
It can be. I can tell you this, it's definitely been, it's probably been one of the more beneficial things we've done.
Really?
Yeah. Because
that's cool.
With, just kind of talking about struggle with the tree service, and we started our tree service from absolute scratch.
What year did you start that?
We started that in 2020. Right when COVID happened, actually. That's some weird pickup in here.
We're getting some weird pickup in here for sure. Sorry about that. And again, I don't want our listeners to hear it, but I hope they do. Otherwise, they're going to think we're nuts. Like, what are they talking about? I swear to goodness, it feels like ghosts are just coming right through here.
What did they take before they got on the podcast?
Jeez. Anyway.
But so we started the tree business from scratch. I learned to cut trees. My father started teaching me to cut down trees at about 14. There is
tree
anything my dad
painting.
Can't
what
do.
else?
There's nothing my dad can't do. So he taught me, started teaching me how to run a chainsaw and stuff about 14. I went to work for Wright's Tree Service. I was probably 22 or 23, and learned climbing at Wright's Tree Service, right next to super high voltage power lines that can just
great
poof you into dust real quick.
Yeah.
And then I found my way into cell towers, but I always had trees kind of in the back of my mind. It was just, even if it was just going to be like side work, it's good side money.
Yeah.
But we started out with one chainsaw and my dually, and that was it. loading whole trees into the bed of the truck, cutting them down into pieces that were small enough that I could lift them and get them into the bed.
There's your physical work.
Exactly. And I loved every second of it. I really, truly enjoy physical labor. But, we didn't have a name in the tree business, and we didn't have, like what you and Todd talked about, the SEO and marketing and websites. We didn't have any of that.
Yeah.
And so we legit started from absolute scratch. And, with that, we go through what I call the waves. So sometimes business is way up. So like for about 2 weeks, it'll be nothing but phone calls. And then for about 2 weeks, it will be no phone calls. And so we find ourselves in these waves all the time. But the rental property has helped keep that more even as far as the financial life goes. But that's, those waves are their own struggle. And I'm sure you in marketing know that all too well.
Yeah, I was, it's up and down. I 2 recent conversations I had was with one of our clients who called, obviously an owner of a business, and we were just talking about, though we didn't say the term waves, but how did fourth quarter compare to first quarter? How did this year start versus this point last year? So we were just talking about, a lot of times you ask people, how's business? And most of the time people go, business is great.
Absolutely.
Is it? I mean, there are times when you absolutely love what you're doing and you can see why you're in it. And then there are days that any sensible person goes, why the heck am I doing this?
Why am I still here?
I made a joke with, I was in a meeting with my business partner, one of our team members, and I made a joke. I said, whatever we were talking about, I'm like, let me just make this clear. We're crazy being in this business to begin with. Marketing is a crazy place, ever changing. Expectations for performance and delivering is just so high. Results, outcomes, constantly having to look at analytics and talk through. I'm like, we are absolutely insane even doing this thing, let alone be owners of a business. It's right. Just the ebbs and flows, the tides, the waves. It's just, it can be hard sometimes. You have to be resilient. You have to have backbone. You have to stay positive. You have to be willing to accept the lows. And so you can really enjoy the highs, and you have to always be thinking about, what can I control? What can I control? What am I willing to accept? What am I not willing to accept? What can I do differently? What can I change? What can I improve? What can I stop doing? I mean, this is constant. It is.
It's 100% constant.
I mean, the stuff I just said, all that goes through my mind, not on a regular basis per se, but there are certain events and occurrences that make you, on some level, do something like that.
Yeah, really make you question a lot of what you're doing sometimes. Right. I know for me even, I question myself constantly.
Yeah, it's like, I don't mind hard work and I don't mind hard times. It's just, you do certain things, you put in certain effort. Here's the thing, there's no guarantee.
Yeah.
There's no guarantee to the fruits of your labor. You can have a great idea, you can work your butt off, you can put your heart and soul into it, but there are still things that might derail whatever it is you're doing.
And you could have no control over those things.
And no control over those things. And that, to me, is probably the hardest part about being a business owner, is accepting, as you call, the waves. And sometimes it's nothing you did. There's nothing you can do about it.
Right.
It just happens.
Yeah.
It's tough sometimes, I tell you.
It is. And one thing I've learned over the last few years is that, so I'll be talking to my assistant on the phone, and she'll, oh, well, this person canceled, or you took the bucket truck a little off the driveway, and now they've got a ditch in their grass and they're not happy about it. Just dealing with so many different customers on a regular basis.
It's hard.
It was hard. The hardest to learn that you're never going to make everybody happy.
No.
I'm a big people pleaser. I want everybody around me to be happy.
You want to do your best work.
Yeah, absolutely. I want people to, we all want people to recommend our services to the next person.
Absolutely.
But I mean, it even goes for me, for my family. Like if nobody's happy, I am so stressed out. Like, why can't you all just be happy? And it drives me nuts. But one thing that I've learned with Capital Tree Service is it's really easy to focus on the losses or the stresses of whatever may be happening at that point in time, but you've got to find a way to focus on those wins, even if they're just little bitty wins, and it doesn't add up to a hill of beans. If you focus on that little win more than we focus on the stresses or the things that are the things that have gone wrong, you're going to feel a lot better about it.
It's true. I see it sometimes. You know, you see it in business, you see it in couples. Have you ever noticed over life when one person's being maybe negative or has a negative feeling, the other person is the opposite? And then when that person has their moment, that person is the one who steps up.
Yep.
So sometimes, you know, you just have that situation where I like to think I'm positive all the time. I think I'm getting, as I get wiser and I learn, I think I'm having more positive than negative moments. I consider myself to be a positive and optimistic person. Sure. But even I fall short sometimes. But it's really funny. Sometimes my business partner will be on the side where it's like, oh, well, you know, this is so hard, and why can't this happen, and why can't that? And I'm always the one coming in and inserting the positive way to look at it. Well, look at all these blessings we have.
Right.
And then I have my moment, and then it's her turn.
Yep.
So thank God we have people. So with that being said, now I think about it, my next question is, was your wife, during that 6 months or beyond, was your wife the rock all the time, or did you guys have that ebb and flow in terms of positive and negative energy as well?
Sure. So right after the accident, she was absolutely the rock. Because I couldn't do anything.
Right.
She really had to step up, and it was amazing to see.
How did she respond to the moments where maybe you were feeling sorry for yourself, or you were angry or bitter? How did your wife respond to that without lecturing you per se? How did she keep you focused and on track? How did that happen?
Well, a lot of it was, you know, she would always remind me that it wasn't malicious.
Right.
You know, and I think once you beat that into your head enough that, like, nobody's out trying to hurt you, it takes that kind of defangs it a lot. You know, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And you realize that it was just, you know, things happen.
So you might feel like a victim initially, and then you realize you're not a victim. It's just you're the recipient of a horrible, crazy situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
The odds of that happening again are so slim. It just boom, just happened.
Even though I'm still driving a 5500 now and not a 2500.
Are you?
Yeah. I can't get. I have a hard time getting in small cars.
Okay.
If I get nervous, I get a really bad stutter going. It's awful.
Really? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, my buddy James was actually. We were actually talking about my stutter just the other day. He's like, "Man, your stutter has."
Did you have a stutter when you were younger?
No, it was actually from the accident.
Oh, from the accident?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I got this really awful stutter, and it mostly came.
I've never heard it though. When does it come out?
It mostly would come out when I was talking about the accident, just really, really in depth.
Okay. So stress related, or?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
Okay.
But it's come a long way. I don't hardly stutter anymore. But yeah, for a couple of years after the accident, it was real bad.
Okay, so you've learned to overcome that.
Yeah.
It comes and goes.
It was really weird the way my stutter would work. If I was trying to tell you that I can't do something and say I stutter on the word can't, well, now that's like a block, and I can't use that word. And so I have to figure out a whole nother way to say it. It was terrible. I mean, I was in my realtor's office one time, and I started stuttering, and I slammed my hand on the desk because I couldn't get the word out.
That kind of helps you focus.
It didn't, but
it did.
I was just so upset with myself, and I was so upset with myself that it was just, you know, and man, my realtor didn't know about my stutter, and he didn't know about any of that.
Oh.
He looked at me like, man, was this guy gonna come across the desk or? But
so let's cover a few things that were shared in your intro, because I think that's really cool. So let's get specific. What does it mean to you? What does it mean to turn pain into purpose?
Oh man, So,
because like I told you in the beginning, I just absolutely I just love pain and the purpose. It's a really neat thing. So what does that mean for you?
So a lot of it is framing the pain correctly initially. So whenever the pain initially first comes,
are you talking about physical pain or
mental, emotional, physical?
Okay.
I don't know that you can really frame physical pain. Physical pain is just kind of physical.
It's just the physical pain. Yeah. I just want to get that clarified.
Yeah,
right.
But as your stress, your struggles, as they come, we've got to frame them in the right way so that we can build off of them.
Okay.
Right. You can't look at it as this is a struggle that's going to tear me down. There's something to learn inside of that struggle. Okay. And as humans, we typically only seem to learn through struggle. I mean, how many times in your life has somebody said, "Oh, yeah, you probably shouldn't do that," and then you went and did it anyway because you had to figure it out for yourself.
Like I was saying earlier, we're all good when things are good to go. We're all good to go. But what do we do when we're faced with adversity, challenges, struggles? Like that's when the rubber hits the road. That's when our true character comes out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of liken it to like iron ore in a forge, and with a blacksmith. The blacksmith, the pain that we feel, the struggles that we feel, they're the forge, they're the fire, they're the hammer blows, right? And they're being used to shape us into who we are, right? Yeah. Whenever we're born, we are just raw iron ore dug out of the ground. And as we grow and we go through pain and we go through struggle, we become forged and we become pure and we become the people that we're supposed to be, right? There's a plan for all of us.
So it's a work in progress for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead. Go. No, please.
And if you quit in these struggles and you're not looking for something to garner from it, it would be like if the blacksmith just quit on the sword halfway through. Well, now you're just some screwed up piece of metal. You're nothing. But if you can fight on through those struggles and realize it's just part of the process, it makes things a lot easier, understanding that you're going through a process of refinement. If that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. So you said a framework. So the current framework by which you see these things, is that different post-accident versus pre-accident?
Oh, very.
Okay.
Very. Pre-accident, I very reactive to things. I think a lot of us live in a very reactive world.
We do. I spent most of my life being reactive, and man, my life is so much better now that I'm not.
Absolutely.
It's so much better.
Once you realize, and I think this is the big one, once you realize that you have a choice in how you react to the stimuli in your life, whatever that stimulus is, right? Whether it's hardship, whether it's positive things, it doesn't matter. Once you realize that you have the ability to choose how to react to something, a client's not happy with something or whatever, you can get mad and be like, we did the best work we possibly could. Or you could go, well, we'll come back and fix it. You have those options.
One of the things I shared before we started, I told you that, and again, I throw this number out. There's no scientific proof to it. I just believe that I always use the number 95. I just believe, looking back on my own life, 95%, you mentioned about choices. I really do believe that, we talk about happiness, right? The word happiness. So what creates happiness? And we talk about our faith and we talk about things that happen in our life. But I look back on my life, and if I'm being honest and fair and objective, I look back and I go, okay, I was born into this family. This happened to me. I remember for most of my life, I would always refer back to events in my life. And that was, I didn't use the word, but it was like an excuse. I didn't realize it. Like, well, I'm this way because this happened, and because of that happened, and blah blah blah. And then all of a sudden, all of a sudden I started looking at life differently. I started thinking about, well, there are some key moments that happened to me, and there is definitely some unfortunate things that were unfair. But when I really look at it, I look at, well, that choice and that decision, good or bad, I look back and I started really taking stock of my life, and I started thinking about, like, geez, most of where I am today, whether it's a positive consequence, a negative consequence, wherever it is, where I am in my life, I look back and I go, I feel like 90 to 95% of who I am, where I am, my whole the way I interact with the world, respond to the world, I'm 90 or 95% responsible for that.
Absolutely.
And so I didn't use the word framework, but now as you're speaking about it, when my framework changed, when I started looking at how do I want to interpret these events in my life, and how do I want to feel about these things? How do I want to respond to these things? How can these things impact future decisions and future choices? All of a sudden, I was happier.
Yep.
I felt more grounded. I felt my life had more balance.
Yep.
Like, I was realizing that, this thing called life is tough, and there's all these circumstances just hitting us all the time. But man, the inner peace that we feel, the peace that we have inside, we are so responsible for that. It's incredible.
Absolutely.
How did that change for you after the accident?
So I learned, I actually learned a statistic about stress shortly after the accident. So a stress response is really only supposed to last 10 to 15 seconds.
Really?
Yeah. So think about like a gazelle.
You mean that immediate reaction?
Yeah. It's the fight or flight, right?
Yeah.
And so, like think about a gazelle on the plains of the Serengeti or whatever, and a cheetah's chasing him. He's got that stress
in that moment.
But when the cheetah doesn't get him and he runs off into the sunset, he's not stressed about running into the sunset. Right? Because it's just to get you moving to quell that whatever that stress.
So do you think long-term stress is more of a human condition?
I do.
Is it self-inflicted?
I do. I do. I really think that it is self-inflicted.
Because we choose or decide to hold on to it or embellish it, or what's going on, do you think? I know you're not a psychologist, right. but based on your own experience, what do you think's going on there?
I think a lot of it's dwelling on it. And we tend to look back at things and go, well, what could I have done different? What could I have done better? What could I have done wrong? So that's going to keep you in that situation.
I like that. Yeah, it's true.
But I think a lot of it is most of the stresses are in our heads.
We're creating it for ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that a lot of the stress that we feel, it's like whenever you come up against a new problem, right? Your problems, everyone's problems feel 1,000 foot tall,
and we think they're our own.
Yeah,
like, oh, this problem is so monumental to us.
It's huge. But how many times have you felt like you had this big problem that you needed to tackle, and you put it off and you let it stress you out because you're not dealing with it, and then finally you go, okay, I got to do something about this, and it takes you 5 minutes, and you're like, are you kidding me?
That's funny.
I have been stressed out about this for months, and I finally just went and did it, and it took 5 minutes, and it wasn't a big deal, and I've been losing my mind over this. I think the inner monologue, honestly, hurts you a lot.
What you tell yourself.
There's a lot of things that our brains tell us that aren't real.
From memory, like that we're programmed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes self-programmed. I'm not saying things don't. Listen, we're neither of us are psychologists. I'm not even going to pretend. I know that there are things that happen to us, and I know there are things that scar us and damage us psychologically for a long time. I'm not getting into that stuff. I'm not talking about that stuff. I'm talking about the things that, to your point, is this really a big deal? Am I embellishing this? Am I making this into more than what it needs to be? I think I look back on my life, and I agree with you. I would feel something, and I would I don't know. I almost felt like I need to give the feeling justice. So I would hold on to it longer than I needed to. I never thought about that until you said that, but that's what I would do too.
Yep.
Just hold on to it.
Yep.
Interesting.
And a lot of it's letting go. And, I learned a lot from my childhood and realizing that it wasn't my fault. I did the best I could with what I had to deal with. And that took me a long way. Knowing that you did the best you could. And, even if you just tell yourself that you did the best you could. And as long as you're honest with what you could have done better, I think you have a real shot at getting out of it, but stress is a crazy thing. If you don't choose to react the right way, how many times have something bad happened and you get just pissed and you're yelling at everybody and you're like, we see videos of it all the time on the internet. People just losing their minds out in public and
what's going on there, right? Jeez.
People are not. They're forgetting that they have a choice, right? We don't have to just flip out on everybody. I remember riding around. It was right around COVID. I was riding in the truck with one of my employees, and we passed a school bus, and it had 2 adults on it, which I thought was kind of weird anyways, but had 2 adults on it, no children, and they were both wearing masks. And the guy riding with me, and he's a big anti-vaxxer, and COVID's fake, which we won't get into the weeds on that, but and this was real early on too, and he lost his mind because these 2 people were wearing masks. And it's like, you don't know anything about these people. You don't know anything. It was that was a trigger for a lot of people. Yeah, but that's where a lot of people didn't realize that you don't have to just flip out. You can look at it from an even-handed place.
or not let it bother you at all. Just choose not to let it bother you.
That's the better thing, especially in that situation.
I knew I had matured when I would drive on the highway and someone would flip me off, and I was like, oh well.
I'd give them a thumbs up.
Yeah. So when I'm not saying I used to lose my mind or anything, but like literally one of the greatest lessons I learned, I don't know if this is part of your framework or not, but one of the greatest lessons I learned was just I had to tell myself this for a while, and then all of a sudden it just becomes, right? I would just tell myself, literally those words, that doesn't have to bother me. That's not personal.
Right.
That's not about me.
Right.
I can let that go.
Yep.
That's not going to matter 10 seconds from now. But we live in a world now where you look at social media, we live in a world where everyone feels like not only do they have to have a response, but they have to tell the whole world about their response.
Right.
So number one, not only do you need not tell everybody about your feelings about something, but back that up one more, you don't even have to have a response. Like,
right.
There's so much going on in the world, and I see people on Facebook, they're constantly giving their opinion and their thoughts on everything, and I'm like, can't you just let this be? Like, just let it ride, let it play out. Just let it play out. You don't know all the details. You don't know all the background. You don't know the circumstances. You don't know the people. You know nothing.
Right.
And yet you feel this need to get so upset,
worked up,
and then tell the whole freaking world. I tell you, I started realizing I was more mature when I know this sounds really strange. I'm using that word, but like I knew my framework was improving when I wouldn't let certain things bother me, and I realized I'm like, not only do I not want to share my opinion on Facebook, but no one really gives a rat's what about it.
Right.
Like no one cares. Something you said earlier. I mean, obviously we all have meaning and purpose in life within our circles. Like you're a great man and you have great purpose and meaning within your circle. I like to think great meaning and purpose within my circle,
Absolutely.
But outside of my circle, I don't mean it. I'm nothing.
You're nothing.
I'm nothing.
You're nothing.
I mean, I am nothing. I don't want to say I'm dust in the wind because, again, according to God, we all have worth and value and purpose. My self-esteem and self-worth is much better than it was 10 years ago.
Sure.
But my point is, it's like, I felt really good when I didn't have triggers, and I didn't, I realized that I had the ability. I'm like, oh, I'm feeling this. Back it up. Like, I don't have to feel this way.
Right.
I didn't feel the need to tell everybody. I didn't feel the need to give my opinion on things. I wasn't judgmental. I really like this interview, this conversation with you, because I'm definitely sharing more about my perspective
Sure.
than I normally do. But our conversation is really just kind of giving me this level of comfort and freedom to be just as vulnerable as you are.
Yeah.
And I wasn't expecting to do that,
Sure.
But this is why I was so excited, because I might be the host and the interviewer, but whatever you've gone through, I've gone through it in my own way, in my own experience. So I know I've shared a lot more. I know this podcast is about you, and I apologize for hijacking it at times.
It's not about me.
But just the easiness, and I get a sense. I didn't have you on as my guest to talk about this because, oh, poor Eric, and his story is, the worst, and he's been through so much more than other people. That wasn't listen, not to minimize what you've gone through. It's not about that. It's just that you were comfortable coming on and talking about some of the challenges you've had and how you processed it. And I thought, hey, let's do it.
Sure.
Listen, I know a lot of people whose lives are a lot harder than mine. Yeah. I've been through a heck of a lot more. Not to minimize my difficulty, not to minimize yours, but life is hard. Life is difficult.
It is.
But you've given me this comfort level where I'm like, I think I'll share how I feel about this stuff too. So I do appreciate you allowing me to kind of hijack some moments and give my perspective.
Yeah.
And not to overshadow your contributions, but this is a conversation I think, when you have coffee with someone, these are the kind of conversations you should be having. This is really what it's all about.
Yeah, absolutely. And just like you said, when one person starts to open up about and be honest about their struggles,
the transparency,
and what they've been through,
regardless of what it is,
it helps other people to open up, and then we can all start talking about what's really happening in life, and that makes us feel not so weird. Mm-hmm. I think to an extent we all feel kind of like a weirdo. Mm-hmm. Because I'm going through this and it feels like nobody's ever been through this. Mm-hmm. But as you get into it, it makes everyone else around you go, man, I've been through something pretty similar to that too. Mm-hmm. And you're like, oh, well, I guess I could talk about that too, and it makes everyone feel, it makes everyone realize that we're all going through struggles.
So how do you handle that now? So when you go through struggles, and that's exactly my point. The reason I was excited about having this conversation wasn't just the topic itself, but what I was hoping the viewers and listeners can get from it is to see that it's okay to be transparent. It's okay to say I'm struggling. It's okay to say I'm having difficulty. Yeah, maybe my situation isn't as bad, and maybe I need to have a different framework. Maybe I have to accept the fact that life is not perfect, and I can't control everything. I don't know. I don't know. But so to me, that was the. You were so transparent with me when we first met. I thought, that's really cool. Let's talk about that. Let's just have you on and talk about it. So let me ask you this, keeping our listeners in mind. I asked you that question earlier about what life was like before and what life is like now. So when you have difficult times now, mm-hmm. and you have hardships now, where a lot of us beat ourselves up, maybe we're self-loathing, maybe we're hard on ourselves, maybe we're perfectionists, maybe we don't. Whatever's going on, what is your advice? What are your insights into when you're going through a difficult time, when you're having a tough moment, maybe a tough season, maybe a tough stretch, whatever it might be? Mm-hmm. What's the perspective you should have? How should you approach it? What process should you go through? Like, what do you think is the best way to go through it?
Sure. So I think a lot of it is the initial framing, right? If you initially look at it as woe is me, or I can't believe this awful thing happened, I feel like you're going to stay in it a lot longer.
Yeah.
If you can frame it the right way, and especially initially, whenever you first realize that this struggle is coming your way, if you can frame it right off the bat, that's going to do you a lot more good than anything else. And it's really about taking your time whenever you're going through it, realizing why it's happened, and realizing maybe that it's not your fault. There's a good chance it is your fault.
It could be.
And you've got to look back and go, okay, well, what decisions did I make that led to this? But a lot of it's just perseverance and realizing that it may not have been your fault, and realizing that, no matter what you're going through, tomorrow's coming, and it's coming like a freight train. It's going to be here,
whether you like it or not.
Whether you like it or not, whether you're ready for it or not, and whether you're here or not, because some people face struggles and they just quit. Whether it's a struggle in business, like I can't tell you how many times I'm like, I don't know why I'm doing this. I don't want to do this anymore. I can't quit. But, there how many businesses close down every year because they give up. They can't see past the struggle, and they can't see that there's a lesson to learn. And I think
or that there's a solution sometimes too.
Absolutely. But when you take a step back from whatever that struggle is and look at it, you look at it as the whole picture, right? And we have a tendency to just take little pieces of what we want. But when you look at the whole picture, it makes it make sense. And you can, you don't have to get through a struggle, immediately. You can take your time and process it. It's solely up to you. There's no time frame. There's no rush.
I love that. I just recently read something like that, and I passed it along to my kids, at least a couple of them, and I said, it's you actually want to embrace failure. You want to embrace tough moments. It's only through those tough moments that you want to grow. We live, not to stereotype, but I feel like everyone's looking for a quick fix. Everyone's looking for a quick healing process, or they want to mute it, ignore it. A lot of people are afraid to deal with their feelings anymore. They're afraid to have tough times, and they just want to, whether it's lying to themselves, drugs, alcohol, social media, I don't know what. I mean, there are a lot of things out there that we do to mask what we're going through.
Absolutely.
I wish I had taught my kids younger, just it's good to have tough times.
Yeah.
It's good to struggle. It's good to have these feelings of doubt and whatever. That's where you do your greatest thinking. You that's where you gain perspective. That's where you gain insight. That's where it's not, again, it's in those most difficult, darkest times. That's when we have the most growth.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is. And I think, again, not to stereotype, but I feel like that's harder for people nowadays for some reason. And I don't think a lot of people do it as often as they used to. So I encourage my kids to, when you're feeling that negative, whatever that negative feeling is, embrace it, lean into it.
Yeah.
Go through that process.
Yeah. And
see where you come at the end.
Yep, absolutely. And these are, one thing is that you've got to remember, these are things to help build your character. They're not, our struggles in life aren't meant to tear us down. They're not meant to make us quit. Whether it's God, whether it's the universe, your higher power, whatever you believe in, that's putting you through these struggles, they're to help you grow. And if you have that growth mindset of there's something to gain from this, and it makes it to it again, it kind of defangs it. When I'm looking for something to learn, rather than just beating myself up because we messed up something, and I realize there's something to learn in that, then I don't feel so bad about, oh man, we made a rut in this lady's yard or whatever with the bucket truck. We'll learn from that.
So as we come to a close, I want to ask you this. So you had your pre-accident life and then your post-accident. And we didn't talk about it as much here, but obviously you had immediate challenges from the accident.
Yeah.
And then you guys had to figure this thing out. And obviously, we talked about, not only did we have that crazy COVID stuff, but business is hard in general, as it is, regardless of the economy and whatever's going on in the world. So obviously, we talked more off camera about those struggles. But it sounds like your life was easier before the accident, and it's harder since. But yes, okay. So and I know we talked about a lot of different things, ways of looking at things, but ultimately, what do you give the most credit to? So if you were to sum it up in one word or a couple sentences, what has been the biggest change that took you from your life before the accident? You're going through more, like we talked about, more difficult moments, stretches, seasons, yet it seems like you may actually be more positive and happier and more balanced and grounded. So of all the things that you've shared, if we were to sum it up, what makes that possible? Because again, most of us don't do that well.
Sure. Well, I think it goes back to one of the first things that we had talked about whenever the idea of this podcast came up, was embracing the suck.
That's one thing we didn't talk. Yes, embracing the suck. Yes, yes.
And realizing that when you're in the trenches, you're in the trenches, and that's where you need to be, and that's where your work is. And when you're in those low times, that's where you're, like you said, that's where you're going to gain the most growth. And you're going to come out on the other side feeling a lot better about yourself. You're going to come out on the other side learning something. But a lot of it's persistence. You can't quit. You just have to keep digging through the trench. You'll get to the other side. It may take longer than you want, right? But you'll get there. So
do you think your attitude and perspective is what gives you the balance and peace that you have now?
I think
regardless of the ride?
Yeah, I think so. It's a lot of that is very much perspective. Having literally lost everything from my previous life. And having to basically start
rebuild.
Over. Yeah. And again, I think it goes back to that perseverance and that knowing that you can't quit, like I've got small kids. Your kids are a little older than mine, but
a lot older than yours.
But like I can't quit. These kids need fed. And I think it has a lot to do with again, how you frame it.
Yep.
Realizing that there is something to learn. There's always something to learn. Good, bad, or ugly. There's always something to learn.
Yeah. So one thing I want to get your thought on. So think prior to and following the accident, because there's been a lot before and a lot after. What was important and what mattered? Have you ever given thought to how you looked? Maybe it's the same, but I'm curious. What mattered to you? What was important? What drove you before the accident? And then in the years since, with all the challenges, do you have a different focus on what matters, what's important, what drives you? Has that changed at all?
Sure. So before the accident, I was very career minded.
Okay.
I was building this life in the cell tower industry. That's what I
was on the road.
On the road, gone all the time.
So the career path, making the money, the providing was the big thing. And,
absolutely. And now it's, we all want to make a lot of money. But now it's more about, and this could have a lot to do with the fact that I've had 3 kids since the accident.
Okay. So you have
we have 4 now.
Oh, you have 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
We had.
You had one right after. Right about the time.
Yeah, 3 days.
For 3 days before.
3 days beforehand.
Yeah.
And I was actually on my way to the NICU that day
right.
to see her.
Yeah.
But having more kids has really offered a lot more perspective on the things that are important.
Yep.
You know, when you're young, you're out on the road, you're making money. It's like, this is where I'm at. Once you have kids and you're out on the road, it's no fun anymore.
Right. That's true. That does play a factor. Yeah.
So my life now is more based around them, and, you know, how do I keep making the right decisions to keep them going. But, you know, one thing I try to teach my kids is, and this is one thing I've always pounded into their heads, is that whenever you first start something, you're not going to be any good at it. You're going to be awful at it because kids, they like to jump into something and they try it out and then they don't like it.
They either get hard on themselves or they quit.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely. And so, you know, it's like, you know, we've been in the tree business for going on 5 years now, and we weren't very good when we first started. And it's all a process. It's a learning process. And as long as you're always learning, you know, you'll get there. But my life is very different now, as far as what I focus on. Like I said, it's way more about my kids, my family, and teaching my kids how to frame things right, so they don't have to go through. You know, the last thing I want them to do is go through what I've been through.
I just on a funny note, I thought about titling this, you know, "Embrace the Suck." But I just didn't know how that would be taken. Sure. That has so many connotations.
Sure.
Talking to you one-on-one, and if people hear that now, it makes sense. But I thought to myself, even if I have a description, or what are people going to think when they first see Embrace the, like, right. Is this some kind of like, what are they doing here? So anyway, I had to put a little humor in there. All right, so let's wrap up by, so I shared with you, being a business owner is tough.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot. I've been divorced. I've had, 3 kids. I've learned a lot. One of the things that, full transparency, I wouldn't say I beat myself up, but I think a lot about what I would have done differently. And, I think you can never get away from those things. Once your framework changes and you look back on your previous framework, you're just like, what are you doing, dude? Like, What were you thinking?
Yeah.
Like, why did you, it's just so frustrating. But so that's a whole nother rabbit hole. But from a business perspective, most of my audience are business owners, business leaders. I mentioned earlier about we talked about the waves, the ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
And it's so easy something happens, you go, oh no. And you get so fixated on that. Oh, I lost a client, or a client's upset, or something didn't go right, like you said.
Right.
So what is your advice? So, and tying that to what you just shared, I wanted to ask that question about what matters to you, because it is important to keep our doors open. We have to pay the bills.
Yeah.
So we can sit there and say our wife matters to us, our spouse, our kids, our faith. We have all these things that matter. And it's weird because those are technically our faith and our family are the most important things.
Yeah.
But if you don't go to work,
it all just kind of stops.
It all stops.
Yeah.
So is work the most important thing? No, it's not. But it is, but it's not. See what I mean? So I struggle with that one sometimes.
It's a tightrope.
It is a tightrope. Yes, it's a fine line. So how do you, what would be your advice in terms of how to balance that between making work a priority, but at the same time making your wife and kids and your life and your faith and your life in general the most important thing?
Sure. So a lot of that is a lot of it's perspective, but a lot of it's a lot of it I have to force myself to be present, because I am very it's very easy for me to slip back into that pre-accident. I need to work, right?
Because that's really who you are.
I've got to provide for for this family that I've created. So as a business owner, I'm like, I got to work. But what I do that helps me the most is like 4:00, I'm done.
Oh,
don't call me, leave me alone. I'm home with my kids. I really try to focus on being home. Like when my 2 oldest get off the bus, I really like to pick them up from the bus. But that's honestly my biggest thing. I mean, not saying that after 4 o'clock I don't answer my phone. I definitely answer my phone, but
You're just not working anymore.
I really try to keep my work to 10, 15 minute. If it's after 4 o'clock, 10, 15 minute phone call. Please leave me alone.
I'm going to call you at 4:01 today. I'm going to test you.
You got it. I'll give you 15. Now the older ones, they usually get home about 4:10. So I can handle 10 minutes for you.
Okay.
But it's a struggle. It really is. Especially as the business, we're kind of coming into a busy season now with summer and everything in the tree business. And it can get really chaotic. But I think for me, the biggest thing is if I try to be home by 4, it lets my kids know that I'm going to be there at a certain time. And they know to expect me at a certain time.
That's good.
And yeah, I think so.
But that's a real switch from where you were before.
Big time. Because, we used to, man,
So if you have a challenge then, if something's going on in your business, do you have the attitude of, it'll wait, I'll deal with it tomorrow?
It'll absolutely be there tomorrow.
And you're able to do that?
For the most part. I mean, there are certain extenuating circumstances.
Okay, right.
There's always an extenuating circumstance somewhere.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, I have definitely learned to realize that this problem doesn't have to be solved right now.
Yeah. Which is hard for some people.
It is. And, a lot of times, if your client knows that, if you've upset your client or one of your employees has upset one of your clients.
Yeah.
Your client's not sitting there going, this needs to be done now. And it's like 8 o'clock.
It's not as urgent as you think.
It's never as urgent as you think.
It's true.
And that's where we take those stresses and we make them bigger in our heads than what they really are.
Interesting.
And, once you know that we can solve this first thing in the morning.
Sometimes the urgency is self-inflicted.
Very, very much so.
Okay.
And how many times have you talk to a customer and they seem upset and then they're like, well, as long as you're working on it,
it's true.
I'm not concerned.
It's true.
I just don't want to be forgotten about.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
So there's a big difference there.
Sure.
But knowing that problem is still going to be there tomorrow, even if you don't solve it tonight. Taking a step back can help. Like, how many times have you been working on a car or working on, for me, a chainsaw or a dirt bike, and it's just not running right, and you've got a helmet fire, you can't think straight, you just stressed this problem has really taken a toll on you. Well, I promise you, if you put your wrench down, you go in the house, enjoy the rest of your evening. You can come back out tomorrow. I promise you. It's still going to be there just the way you left it.
And honestly, sorry to throw this in, but one of the things I'm realizing later in my life is that I'm learning now in everything, whether it's a game I'm playing or a problem I'm trying to solve. One thing I don't know what this is called or how it happens, and I wish I had not learned it. I wish I had seen it when I was younger, because it's not something you learn. It just is. It's the craziest thing. I'll put something down I'll step away, and then a lot of times when I come back, all of a sudden I see it.
Yep.
Like there are these word games that I play. It blows my mind. I'll be playing these word games, and I like the English language. I like to stay fresh on words. So there's this game I play, and you have to. The bottom line is it's a puzzle, and sometimes I get stuck, and I can't see it. I kid you not. I'll step away for maybe 10 minutes. And I come back and boom, there's the word.
Right.
It's like, well, wait a minute. I didn't think about it. I didn't give it any time. And yet I stepped away.
Yep.
I came back and boom. So sometimes when we're struggling, sometimes it actually is best just to walk away.
Yeah.
And sometimes subconsciously we walk back in later or the next day. Boom, there's the answer.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's kind of a neat thing.
Yeah, taking that step back can really give you a good reset.
That's why it's good to sometimes work on something in stages.
Yeah.
Because your best work isn't necessarily that first time.
Sure.
It could be that second or third time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also gives you time to have that second or third thought as the process is going, and maybe you can refine it or make it more efficient in the process.
That's really cool. I like that.
Yeah.
Well, we can talk about this for hours because this is such a big life thing, right? So what I want to do is I just want to give you, before we close out, rather than ask you another question, is there anything? I know we were both excited about this. I know there's so much that you may still want to share. Is there anything you want to tell or share that you didn't get a chance to? One lasting impression you want to make, one lasting word of wisdom. What would you like to share?
Well, man, there's so much to all of this. It would be hard to break it down into one individual thing.
Well, if you want to, I mean, you're welcome just to read through what you wrote down.
Sure. So I think we hit on a lot of these talking points.
Yeah.
Realizing that you're not the only one going through a struggle. We're all going through
something. It's not as big as we think it is.
Exactly. And 25% of it is probably, at least 25% of it. I don't know what the real statistic is, but there's a good chunk of it that's mostly just in your head.
Yep.
That you're just making up, and it's really not as bad as you're making it out to be. And that's where I think if we really focus on even the small wins, it helps to keep the things that are stressing us out in perspective, if that makes sense.
That's one of the things I try to remember is, celebrate the wins and the victories. It's not always easy to remember.
Yeah.
I try to make it something formal at our company, but it's hard to always be, because that's the thing. You're always moving on to the next thing.
Yep.
In theory, I want to celebrate the small wins and the small victories. It's just that I don't always remember to do that. Because you know why? Because I got to go to the next task or the next problem or the next challenge. So unfortunately, I like that, because we should celebrate all victories, small and large, but we don't, because we're so freaking fixated on the problems, the challenges, and the task in front of us.
And I think
we don't stop and just enjoy it.
Right. And I think we're also hardwired to see the negative. I really do. It just stands out to us more. Especially in business, you could be surrounded by a lot of negative really quick. And then a small win comes up that could make you feel a lot better about the negative that you're surrounded by, but you just go, whatever. I got these problems to deal with.
That's right.
Instead of taking 3 to 5 minutes and just going, woohoo, we got that one. You just kind of shrug it off and go back to your problems. And taking even just 5 minutes to really celebrate that win and go, we did it.
Yeah, because you're retraining your brain in a positive way.
Yep.
To recognize those things. The more you train your brain to celebrate, the more it'll recognize.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really cool. What else?
Finding meaning in your struggles and framing it right off the bat.
Gaining perspective quickly.
You really need to do it.
Not going off the rails
Don't dive into the struggle. Take a step back before you start taking this thing apart, and figure out what you can garner from it.
Yeah.
If there's anything that you can garner from
Okay.
it. And there's usually always something. And and I think the biggest thing is you've got to realize that no matter what path you're on, there's going to be a breakdown. It's like being in a car. Your car is eventually going to break down.
Not going to last forever.
It's not going to last forever. It may even leave you stranded. But all the skills that you've learned from your previous struggles, and those are going to help you get that car back on the road.
Yeah.
But if we don't learn anything in those struggles, you're going to be stuck on the side of the road going, well, what do I do now? And waiting on the tow truck instead of fixing your problem yourself.
It's true.
But I think that's I think knowing that the breakdowns are going to happen, that the struggles are going to happen, that they're coming. There's nothing you can do about it. Nobody's life is stress free. I mean,
I would argue that 25% is probably very conservative.
It very well could be.
I mean, I throw out these numbers, 99. I don't know this statistically,
right?
But I do believe a lot of our choices and decisions dictate our happiness and our future and where we are. I think 25% is not to challenge you on that or to say you're wrong, but I think it's even higher.
It very well could be.
I mean, when I was younger, I might have thought it was too high.
Sure.
Now that I'm older and wiser and have learned and reflected, I'm like, it's probably a little bit. a little bit higher than that.
Yeah,
So.
and it very well could be, but I try to keep conservative.
It's just unfortunate. It's unfortunate that we have to go through an accident or a divorce or, a lost job or whatever it is. Whatever it is, that struggle is. It's really, it's really unfortunate that sometimes we have to have some kind of monumental moment, open our eyes. But that is, unfortunately, that's the truth for most people.
Yeah,
it just is.
Yeah, we learn through struggle.
We learn through some of those big moments that just hit us square between the eye and go, "What are you going to do about it?"
Right.
What are you going to do about it? I'll tell you what I'm going to do about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you have some people that, get in bed and never get out of bed and they never walk outside again. I'm using metaphors and maybe literal. Or you have some people that say, you know what, screw that. I'm going to rise up. I'm going to meet this head on. Yeah. I'm going to become a better version of myself. I'm going to learn from this. I'm going to grow from this. I'm going to be better for this. And, what are you going to do? It's one or the other. You either quit, like you've said that already. You either quit or you fight back.
Yeah, and it's all about carry on.
Yeah.
You just got to figure out a way. If your stress is that high, you've got to figure out a way to just, even if it's just one more step. One more step. Which
is why we love movies about perseverance.
Sure.
We like underdogs. We like comebacks. We like overcoming. There's a reason we like those movies.
Yeah.
Because down deep, that's what we want.
They're relatable.
I just recently watched Cinderella Man. I watch it over and over again. I know it's a movie, but it's based on a true story, and I love it. Yeah. Have you ever seen Cinderella Man?
No,
okay.
No, I don't really watch movies.
Okay.
I'll watch documentaries all day.
Okay.
But,
well, if you're going to watch one movie, watch Cinderella Man.
Okay.
Ron Howard directed it, produced it, whatever.
Sure.
And it's a true story about a boxer who, it's a really actually perfect for our conversation. He was a pretty big fighter, made really good money. They lived in a really nice home, and then the Depression hit, and he got an injury, lost everything. He went from living in what I would call a pretty posh house into living in the basement of this building.
Oh, wow.
They were using scraps for fire. They barely had food on their table.
Sure.
He broke his hand, but this movie is about, and it's a true story. I'm not going to tell you how it ends, but what I can tell you is this guy had everything. Metaphorically speaking, he got hit by a dump truck.
Yep.
And he had to make a choice. His character is what led him. His principles,
sure.
His values, his character led him to never give up. And then opportunities came, and he took those opportunities. Mm-hmm. And in the end, I'll let you find out. But I think we love movies like that because we like to see people overcome obstacles, overcome fears, overcome struggles. Down deep, we love it. Yeah. Because down deep, they're not just the stories that we enjoy, but that's really the heart and soul of life.
Yeah.
You get knocked down.
Yeah.
Maybe you break your hand. Maybe you lose your job. All kinds of things can happen. But what are you going to do about it? And I think I love movies like that.
Sure.
I love Rocky 2.
Yeah.
I love those things because I just love that. I love what people do in spite of their circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love it.
I'm the same way, and we like those movies because we want to see ourselves in that.
Or documentaries in your case.
Yeah, documentaries.
I like documentaries too.
I'm big into World War II.
Okay.
Actually.
Okay.
I'm a World War II nerd.
Yeah, my dad is, and so is my brother.
Sure.
Yeah.
But it's just a fun ride.
It is a fun ride.
And you got to be ready for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but like you said, to wrap all this up is the attitude and the perspective and the framework. It's like you say, it's going to come, mm-hmm. and it's going to keep coming. You got to be ready for it.
It never stops.
It never stops. What else? Do you have anything else you want to?
That's about it, man.
Okay. Well, this was wonderful. And again, thank you for allowing me to participate as much as you did.
Yeah.
I didn't plan it. It's just this conversation. This is life.
It is.
This is life.
And you can't plan life.
And that's why I was so excited about having you on, because I talk about a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I've had, a lot of different topics we've discussed with my guests.
Sure.
But man, this thing that we talked about today is, it's never going away.
No.
I think a lot of people struggle with it. I think a lot of us go, how are you? I'm fine. How's business? It's good.
Oh, yeah.
Anything, we always like to just, everything's fine. Is it really? Is it really?
I usually tell people I'm living the dream.
There you go.
And then I remind them that nightmares are dreams too.
It's true. Good point.
Most people forget that nightmares are dreams.
Good point. Good point. Well, thank you. I'm glad I'm glad I asked that question because I remember before we jumped on, you had some other thoughts.
Yeah.
That was not planned. I was like, do you have anything? Oh, yeah, that's right. You have your list.
No, that was perfect.
That's perfect. Yeah. So thank you very much
Thanks for having me.
making the drive to Anderson from Mooresville.
Yeah.
I'm really glad we met. I'm really glad you came on here. I really, like I said, I want people to be inspired. I want them to solve problems. And I can't imagine they're not going to take something from what you shared and apply it and make their life better.
Well, I sure hope so.
Yeah, new perspective, a new framework, a new attitude.
Absolutely.
Life is hard, but I like the way you've been transformed. I like the way you've transitioned. I like it's really great to see that you've overcome hardship and you've put life in perspective. You now know what's really important.
Yeah.
And it seems like you're dealing with, adversity and struggles really well.
I'm trying.
You're trying. So anyway, I think it's great. I know your life's not perfect. I know that it's not a perfect system, but it's a great way to look at life.
And it's never going to be perfect.
Yeah. And your accident was horrible. But again, sometimes we have to go through something like that. Otherwise, you would probably still be, if you hadn't had that accident, your kids would be, when's dad coming home?
Right.
And you would still be up in the towers working 48, 50, 60 hours.
60, 70 hours a week.
You'd be gone all the time.
Oh, yeah.
So what's the trade-off? You're now a business owner. Yes, that has struggles. Yes, you got to be creative. Yes, you have to overcome things. Yes, you have to come up with solutions. But here's the beauty of it. You have a deeper relationship with your wife. You have a deeper relationship with your kids.
Absolutely.
You now have a different perspective. You have more balance. You still have to provide. You can't say the work's not important.
Right.
But you now know how to live your life better.
Yeah.
I think that's what I take away from it.
Yeah.
Which is probably what is now brings you the joy and happiness you have. Yeah, I have these struggles, but so what? Everybody does.
Everybody does.
But I handle them well, and I know what's important.
Yes.
And therefore, I'm good.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I think that's great. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks for being vulnerable.
Yeah.
Thanks for opening your life
Yeah.
to those who are listening and
Absolutely.
being willing to share that. I know you enjoy it, but I know it's not easy either.
The more you talk about it, the easier it gets.
Okay.
For
good.
sure.
Okay.
And that's actually something to remember with struggles too. Is the more you talk about your own struggles, not that you want to live in them,
Right.
but the more you're honest about them, it just defangs them. It makes them not.
Yeah. It takes
the edge off.
It does. You take some of the power back.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
So yeah. So not only is it an opportunity to. Not only is it talking through it. What I've learned is I talk through things sometimes because it's talking through it.
Yeah.
That actually helps me figure it out.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to share your struggles and your shortcomings with other people.
Yeah.
Because not only will they maybe have something helpful to tell you, but you may figure out your problem and struggle just from talking about it.
And you can help them out too.
Right. You can help them out. Okay. All right. Listen, thanks for watching and or listening to this episode. For previous and future episodes, you can find us on our iHeart. I always have to read this because I always forget. iHeart Podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, and our website. In the meantime, may you, your family, your team, your customers, and your communities be blessed.